Hello everybody, welcome to game number 4, Group A, Week 2 of the Asteroid Belt Tournament. In this game we have Jim Bob the Mighty, Bob Roney, Sophie, and Trat Pingvin. I'm going to call it Trat. We're on Io. We have expansives, scavengers, scientists, and elites. I see right now a pretty good scavenger spot, and I'd expect that might go a little bit early, although there are a plethora of other spots you could count as too. Really nice scientist spot over here, potential for geothermal borehole. Could also go elite there if you wanted to. Some good spots over here too, maybe for an expansive. Seeing plenty of things. We do have Sophie going for a scientist over there, going for that iron ice instead of the basalt ice. I think I strictly prefer this one over here. Sophie did take it for 24k debt, which seems a bit high on Io. Jim Bob going for a scientist over here. Trat taking a expansive slot over here. That's also just fine. Just deciding to go into double basalt platforms instead of using that scientific ability on the basalt to build the buildings directly. And then Bob Rooney going for an expansive down here.
A scientific HQ has been upgraded.
Don't see any issue that stands out with any of these founds other than Sophie going for way too much debt given the amount of founding locations. I really would have liked to see somebody go for the scavenger spot though, because on Io scavengers do not have diminishing resources, so you get that very high aluminum, you get some of this very high carbon, you protect it from the nukes. I mean, maybe the nukes did inhibit people from doing that, but I do think whoever founded last, which was Bob Rooney with this expansion spot here, I think they really could have picked that scavenger spot and made it work out well, because they are lagging behind at HQ1. What do you have? Sophie with that earlier found with a scientist is getting doing pretty well, moving into some food for some quick profits. Those will make about 50 without the adjacency. Would like to see, okay, she's moving into a water processor on ice. We'll be able to keep that food production online. Jim Bob over here is going heavy into basic resources. Isn't going to make a terrible amount of money there. We did have Trapping move into fuel early, anticipating and profiting from that fuel bounce, and it's going back up as players are starting. I'm not sure why it's going back up. Possibly from a little bit of shipping that's going on here. The colony's only consuming 0.5 a second there. So Trat is, well, okay, Trat's not selling, that's what's going on. Stockpiling. So that explains the raise in the price. Bob Rooney HQ2 going for a third steel mill. I'd like to see Bob maybe get down some farms, perhaps going for...
An expansive HQ has been upgraded.
Well, I mean, iron collectors still get 45 even after Trat sold all of them. Always a good idea to have a couple of those online on Io. What got going for Bob Rooney going for? Thinking of glass, but now deciding against it, instead moving into some nuclear plants. Nukes are going pretty high. Water is starting to climb, but not too bad. That seems fine. We do have Sophie running away in the lead at this point, making good money. Needs to start worrying about their debt. The power is climbing rather rapidly, moving into another water processor. I'd like to see Sophie maybe put down a couple of nuclear plants over here on this ice to get the there, just so that they can rotate it later into water processor if they need to. They do make a little bit of power from the water processor, so maybe that will be almost enough to cover all of their power costs, so they die bleeding to death. Pretty much done in Sophie's case. They'll just have to watch the interest rates. Trat also in HQ3 moving into power. 45k debt, not going to pay down that power very fast, although let's look at those power plants and look at all that power money, $800. don't think the power price is going to stay high enough to pay down through all the debt, but Trat is going to make a decent amount of money. Bob Rooney trying to EMP. That was a risky EMP thrown right back at Bob. And Bob's nukes are going to be offline. Bob was making power money, still making power money, just not making as much power money. Jim Bob just got up to HQ3 not too long ago, moving into some water processors, some fuel, and glass on the basalt, so that gives Bob some flexibility as far as they can put down some electronics factories, glass kilns, nuclear plants, or steel, or of course the basalt platforms, or EMPs. And Bob Rooney again, this time by Trat. Trat does not want Bob Rooney to make any power money. And because of that, Bob Rooney is actually quite close to paying down all of their debt. Nobody else has noticed that. Sophie is finally positive on the debt department.
An expansive HQ has been upgraded.
I'm not sure where all that power is coming from. A geothermal online over here that I missed. Good choice. Bob Rooney throwing an EMP back on Trat. Some of these other leaders need to get into the fight. Trat right now is looking quite scary. Decent amount of cash on hand. Was making power money. Still making power money. Still making just a little bit now. Only 160, but 25k cash on hand. The same as Bob Rooney, but 1 HQ ahead. So that kind of tells you Trat doing quite well. Jim Bob moving into a patent lab. There's that patent lab. There it is.
A scientific HQ has been upgraded.
Doing up transparent aluminum. Thinking of going into the late game on for space elevators. Space elevators, 32k profit right now. If Bob can go into those space elevators and then move them up with maybe thinking machines to keep them from getting blown up. Protect them, sorry. That's what we're... Sophie moving completely out of all the farms.
Let's get our science on.
That's interesting because farms still make 90 in profit. That seems to be a mistake and or overreaction. We'll have to see how that plays out. Sophie is on HQ4. Also, Jim Bob hit behind, struggling with some debt, deciding to go for synthetic meat instead on that patent lab instead of liquid batteries. Bob still doesn't have any power online, although getting power late, kind of a little bit late for going to power, so they're gonna have to manage this C debt. What do we have for bribe claims on the black market? Who's been buying them all? 2 for Jim Bob, 2 for Trat, 1 apiece, so pretty equal on that. Let's check Bob Rooney. Bob Rooney is sort of lagging out here behind in HQ3. 64k debt on hand, can have the upgrade whenever they want. Probably a little bit worried about Trat getting aggressive with Trat 71k on hand. Trat, Jim Bob also all of a sudden lots of money, but Jim Bob HQ3 probably not going to buy into you, not need to worry about it. Network virusing under Trat, not sure what that's looking for or why. Bob Rooney did a network virus as there are no holograms. Maybe perhaps looking for a Goon Squad. Trat is going to buy into Jim Bob, as Jim Bob does make a very risky upgrade and is going to be punished for it. Bob is going to be taken out by Trat anytime. Gotta check and make sure that you defend yourself if you're in this sort of position. Jim Bob is unfortunately going to go put Trat in a commanding position for the rest of this game with that stock advantage and holding a scientist with thinking. Let's see if Sophie can do anything. Making a really good amount of money on these water processors. Water has gone up a lot, up to 162. We do have some nukes by Bob Rooney. Bob Rooney now HQ4, the same amount of cash as Sophie and Trat, but Trat has the sub. That sub gives, as you can see, about a almost $15 boost on the share price, and starting to make a little bit of money. That's only going to go up further as this is a scientific sub on IO. How can our players get back in the game? Well, Sophie is defending themselves, I think unnecessarily, as Trat does not have enough cash to buy Sophie. I guess going for that fourth one's okay, but I would like to see Sophie upgrade sooner rather than later, when there is no window of opportunity for Bob Rooney and Sophie to gang up on Trat and take them out of the majority buy, but they are going to want to start buying into Trat as soon as possible. Or continue buying into Jim Bob, which is what I would strictly prefer, especially if I'm Bob Rooney with 100 in K debt. Buy up the rest of those 4 shares of stock in Jim Bob before Trat can do it all. Sophie should try and grab a few too, letting Trat take all of these shares into Jim Bob, especially as Jim Bob starts to put up a base elevator. Definitely a mistake. Auction, so I can catch my breath. Adrenaline boost. Or no adrenaline boost in the market. Probably expect this to go for 16k-ish. Maybe a little bit lower. We'll see. 12k, 14. We have the 16. Come on, prove me right. Yes, 16 to Trat. See if it goes any higher. 18 over to Sophie. 18 is fine. Sophie a little bit high debt, but is still in that A rating. Jim Bob Rooney, sorry, definitely can afford this at 28. Well, that's getting a bit high for a single boost, especially with 20k EMPs. 36k, don't bid it up anymore. I think that's high enough. What is Bob Rooney going to do that boost on, or is he going to keep it for the long term? Looks like Bob Rooney is just going to store that for the late game. Bob Rooney does, nope, going to immediately boost the steel mills. Interesting choice. This Bob Rooney wants a lot of steel very quickly. Going to burn through all of their iron. Is going to get that upgrade. HQ5. Not sure that was the best usage of the adrenaline boost, but we'll see, as that's driving steel sky high. That increased steel price is only going to help Trat, who has a surplus of steel right now. Stockpiling it, could start selling, does start selling it down. You make a nice amount of money off of these triple basalt platforms, more than you'd expect. Added in 2 optimization centers.
The hacker array is finished.
Optimizing a plethora of items. That boost for Bob Rooney is done. Didn't quite burn through all their cash in terms of steel production, but is probably going to want to get out of some of it. Mutiny on the optimization center by Trat. This game is looking like Trat's game to win. Trat did get all of the stocks except for one into Jim Bob. Bob Rooney and the Sophie not really paying attention at that point. Can't let someone take over the majority buy and then get the majority of the stocks. That just gives such a high advantage to their share price. Although Trat is making so much money on World from their own piles that the extra 800 from Jim Bob isn't really that much. This is looking like Trat game to win, short of making any sort of mistakes. Bob Rooney and Sophie need to come up with a long-term advantage. Thinking machines is one potential way of getting a long-term advantage. Mutinying the subs base elevator is another. I also want to see Sophie move into transparent aluminum to make the base elevator cost a lot less. That would reduce the price by a little bit, just a little bit under 36k, but still a very long-term advantage for Rat in this game. If I'm Bob Rooney, how do I get back in this game? Well, buying up all of your shares right now is okay, but you probably want to use that money to invest in yourself long-term. Does have some optimizations queued up, but that optimization center is stolen. Used a nuke on Trat, just trying to limit the amount of money that Trat has. Trat also with a patent lab under construction. Curious to see what Trat's going for. Doing an energy shortage, trying to drive the price of power back up.
Successful.
Optimizing a lot of things. Trat definitely in the driver's seat. Remains in the driver's seat. Sophie and Bob Rooney trying to go for the long game, trying to make themselves as expensive to pick up as possible, but Trat already has half the cash on hand that needs, like half the cash on hand? Yeah, about half the cash on hand that he needs to buy out either of them. It's quite hard to see how Trat can not lose this game after Jim Bob handed Trat a giant silver platter on that early mutiny buy, and then Bob Rooney and Sophie garnished that silver platter by not purchasing into Jim Bob's stock until it was too late. And, well, Bob Rooney is going to try and make it interesting by buying into Trat, but that just might mean that Bob Rooney is Trat's first target. Catch my breath during this patent auction. Virtual reality. We do have 2 expansives. Bob Rooney does have a pleasure dome, so 14K might be bidded up a little bit more if I'm Trat, just to try and get Bob Rooney into more debt, as I'm was hacking up and am hacking up energy, but doesn't seem like too big of an issue. Sophie continuing to mutiny the space elevator from Jim Bob, moving into liquid batteries. I would like to see Sophie move into transparent aluminum just to actually get the space elevator up, which I'm assuming is their long-term goal. And once they're going into the space elevator, unfortunately, Trat beats Sophie to transparent aluminum. Not that Trat really needs an Offworld to finish this game. Well, maybe they do. Onworld prices, that's making an okay amount of money on World. Go perhaps a couple more farms. Water processors seem like a slight overcommitment, only making money because of the single optimization and the adjacency. There they go, turning it off. Definitely could go into some electronics, but might not have the carbon production to support it. Moving into some more farms, good idea. Either way, it's very hard to see how Trat loses this game. The way that he would lose this game is if Bob Rooney buys up all of Trat's shares, and then Trat decides not to buy Sophie, then Sophie, with their increasing amount of cash, decides to get enough to purchase Trat. However, Trat's not going to let that happen, identifying that Sophie has long-term cash advantage over Bob Rooney, going to buy into Sophie. Trat just needs 490k, another 100k before Trat picks up Sophie, and will win the game. Look at those ion collectors, almost 400 over 2 tiles. Lots of optimization in them. That would explain why Trat decided to target ion collector. Bob Rooney with nuclear engine. Doesn't really help Bob Rooney too much, as they're not doing that much shipping whatsoever, but it does mean all of their 4 ion collectors straight into profits. Do we have anybody in electronics? Nobody's in electronics, and electronics are pretty high. Trat makes the buy on Sophie. At this point, just a matter of time before Trat wins the game.
Let the planned obsolescence begin.
Bob Rooney, same percentage as Trat, but Bob Rooney needs 1.65 million, $166,000 to buy a single share versus Strat only needs 800. 790 million. Bob Rooney's going to sell out of all their shares. That's just going to make it easier for Trat to finish the game quicker. So we are just going to wait until this game ends, unless Bob Rooney sells all the way out of themselves. So where did Trat make all that money? Well, controlling that early power really good by moving, EMPing Bob Rooney's nuclear plants, especially with that EMP that Bob Rooney handed to Trat. Unfortunately for Bob Rooney, there are no spies and there are no network viruses, so there's really no way to check where that
our methods continue to improve.
Was. I mean, sorry, Goon Squad was, but so it's just a random guess. Bob Rooney is going to concede, so Trat does pick up a win, giving the boosted Pleasure Domes a much-needed victory. Well played by Trat in this game. I think I talked about most things in the game as it was progressing. During our downtime, we can just look at where Trat made all their money really quick before the game ends. Let's look at Trat versus Sophie. Yeah, there you go. 310k power, almost 280 profits for Trat right there. Sophie definitely needed to move into her power earlier, relying only on those water processors didn't help. Jim Bob also greatly helping by not putting too much power there for Trat. And then that sort of powered off Trat's early lead. Trat did make 760k in electronics. Why did I? Okay, there they are. Hidden behind his HQ. Someone was in electronics. I mean, someone had to be chasing this huge electronics price. So that's good. That didn't go completely unnoticed. Sophie, 370k in food. Quite good. 186k oxygen. Sorry, 370k water. 8k in. About the same everywhere else. Yep.